Okay, so welcome everyone to our virtual author event with Abby Jimenez. My name is Debbie Keener and I am the head of marketing and special projects at the Oceanside Library. I encourage everyone to check out our online calendar because we have some great programs this summer, and you should sign up for our summer reading. We have some great prizes this summer as well. I would like to introduce my colleague and fellow presenter for today, Head of Adult Services, Nadine Spano. Together, we are known as Deb and Nay. We have our online book chat on the same page with Deb and Nay. We have our podcast, Books and Banter with Deb and Nay. So we also sit next to each other all day. So it's the Deb and Nay show. But now, Nadine, would you like to have the introduction?
Absolutely. So we're so excited to have you with us today, Abby. Abby Jimenez is a New York Times best-selling author and Food Network champion living in Minnesota. Abby founded Nadia Cakes out of her home kitchen back in 2007. The bakery has since gone on to win numerous Food Network competitions and has amassed an international cult following. Abby loves a good romance. Who doesn't? Coffee, doglets, and not leaving the house.
I'm with you there.
Yes, and we're in a heat wave. I don't know if you are too. I think the whole world is, but it's nice to not be leaving the house too much today. But we're glad you're able to be with us, Abby. We chose your book, Part of Your World, as our summer spotlight for July. We had an amazing book discussion on this book last week. Everyone loved it. It's right there behind you. If you haven't had a chance to pick it up yet, highly recommend it. It was really great. So before we talk about the book, or it's just amazing to see some of the videos about you. You do so many things. You're an entrepreneur, you're a baker, you're a writer, you won a Food Network competition, you're a dog lover. Tell us a little bit of background on you. What was your childhood like? What shaped these parts of your life and your writing?
Well, I can tell you that I never went to school for writing or baking. I ended up joining the workforce right out of high school because I had to. My parents couldn't afford to send me to college. I had to work. So I entered into the retail field, and I was a retail manager for several years and ended up losing my job when I was 27 and pregnant with my third baby in 3 years. Oh, and when I lost my job, I was extremely depressed. I didn't know what I was going to do to make money. We couldn't afford to put these 3 kids in daycare. So I decided, well, I have all this extra time because I just lost my job. So I'm going to go and take some cake decorating classes at the local Michael's. And I always loved to bake. I'm Italian. I grew up, after every dinner, there was always, the really fabulous Italian desserts. And I took 3 months of the Wilton classes at Michael's and then had to drop out at the end before completing the 3rd course to have my baby. And I thought, I'm going to decorate cakes out of my house and just make enough money to pay the cable bill, or buy diapers or something until I figure out what I'm going to do. And I ended up starting a business called Nadia Cakes. And I did that out of my home for 2 years with 3 infants in diapers. I had a newborn, a 1-year-old, and a 2-year-old, all in diapers. It was honestly the hardest 2-year period of my entire life. I had severe carpal tunnel in both hands with nerve damage. I ended up needing surgery. And when I was having the surgery on both wrists, I told my husband, I can't do this. Who does this? People that do what I'm doing either have a daycare or they have a bakery. I was cranking out as many cakes by myself as it now takes 4 full-time people to do in one of my bakeries. My husband was like, well, why don't we open up a bakery? And I was like, that's crazy. We can't open a bakery. What do we know about opening a bakery? I had never worked. I was a waitress once, but I had never worked in food production or anything like that. But he convinced me, and we ended up opening up our first bakery in 2009. And we had to charge the entire opening on our credit cards, which was $125,000 because we couldn't get a loan. And that bakery opened up to instant success, all the people that came to my house and held my newborn while I filled out their order form all came and supported, and Nadia Cakes did really, really well. we ended up getting attention because I was primarily a cake decorator. So I would, make these really gorgeous cakes, and we ended up getting the attention of TLC, Fabulous Cakes on TLC. And they invited me to do an episode of Fabulous Cakes, which we did a gorgeous stacked pillowcase that almost fell over. And then Cupcake Wars contacted me and asked me if I would like to be on that show. And at the time, one of my competitors up in the same area had just won on season 2. And I was like, I don't know if I want to go on Cupcake Wars. Like, what if I lose? And then it's like, well, they're better. They went on Cupcake Wars. We both did. And she won and I didn't. So I said, and I was still under contract with TLC. So I said no. And then we started looking at moving out of California. It was just very expensive to live there. We wanted to open up another business, and it was just so expensive. Like the rent and just everything was really, the school system wasn't that great. So we hopped in our car with all 3 kids, and we took a 5-week cross-country trip to look for the state that we wanted to live in. And we were already living in high desert in California, so we knew we didn't want to be anywhere hot. So we went through the middle of the country and came back up through the top and ended up in Minnesota. And all my kids get car sick. So like my kids puked across the US for 5 weeks, like 5 weeks. Everybody barfed in the car. Yeah, I'm a pro, like vomit does not scare me anymore. So we ended up in Minnesota, and we were like, wow, this place is great. It's beautiful. There's no cupcake shops here. Like there was no Sprinkles, there was no Crumbs, there was none of like the big cupcake chains. There was no mom and pop cupcake shops either. And, in California and New York and it's so saturated with cupcake shops over there. So we were like, let's move to Minnesota. So we got back, sold our house of 8 years, and packed up our whole family and moved to Minnesota in the winter. We didn't know anybody here. We had no friends, no family, no nothing. Went to go open up our shop again, could not get a loan, ended up having to use our own money and borrow money from relatives, and opened up our second shop. And this time I got another call from Food Network, and they asked me if I wanted to do Cupcake Wars again. And I was like, well, that lady, she's not in Minnesota. So I guess if like I lose, like what's the big deal, right? So I went on Cupcake Wars and I ended up winning. We relocated to Minnesota, ended up opening up 2 shops here. So we have one in the suburbs of Minneapolis and one in the suburbs of St. Paul. And we do ship nationwide. And then like after a few years, the bakeries, they're fully staffed. We've had our team in place for a really long time. And I was able to sort of become more administrative. I didn't have to work every day and bake in the kitchen. And I started writing as a hobby. I always loved writing. I took creative writing in high school. I was always in honors English classes. English and writing was always very easy for me. But again, I never went to college for any of that, for anything. And I started writing this really terrible YA book that was really, really awful. And I decided to submit it to a literary agent who was super, super nice about telling me how bad it was, but gently suggested that I maybe go and get some critique partners to help shape my writing. So I joined a site called Critique Circle, and I spent a year on Critique Circle honing my craft. It was like writing boot camp. And I spent 8 to 12 hours a day on that site. It was wild. My husband hated that whole year of our marriage because I was just on the site, on Critique Circle, learning how to write. I submitted my terrible YA book first, and everybody said it was terrible. But everybody kept saying that I was really great at dialogue, that the banter in my book, was really good, even though the whole YA thing was terrible. So I decided to scrap that book and to write a contemporary romance where I leaned really heavily on dialogue. I thought, maybe the guy is living in a different country right now, so they've got to really just talk on the phone and text, and, we have to depend really heavily on the dialogue. So I ended up writing the Happy Ever After playlist on Critique Circle. You may or may not know, that is a book about a young woman who's recovering from grief, and she finds a stray dog. It jumps through her sunroof, and she spends 2 weeks trying to find the dog's owner. And he's this famous musician who's on tour overseas. And that's their meet cute. That's how they meet. So I wrote that book. It got such a good reception on Critique Circle. I decided to query it to an agent. I did, and my agent Stacy is on this Zoom call. And I ended up getting an agent right away, which was fabulous and not normal. And I wrote the Friend Zone, which I don't know if you can see, it's framed back here. The Friend Zone, I wrote that while we were in submissions to publishers, and I ended up getting a 3-book deal with Forever Romance, which is Hachette's romance division. So I've got 2 3-book deals. Part of Your World is my 4th book. It was a New York Times bestseller. I'm very proud of it. We may or may not have signed a movie deal for this book. Yeah, I could neither confirm nor deny the rumors. But this would make a great movie, you guys, and maybe
without a doubt.
Yeah, there might be an announcement at some point. So I've got 2 more books with Hachette. I did sign 2 3-book deals. So the next one after this one is called Yours Truly. I submitted it on Monday to my publisher. It's fully written, and it is about the best friend of Alexis in Part of Your World, who we all loved, Brianna. So yeah, so the next book is Brianna's book, and it's so good. The hero is just, he's the best and memorable I've ever written. Really, really good book.
I love that.
Oh, nice.
So can you give us, and our viewers here with us, a little synopsis of Part of Your World? It was, like I said, it was amazing. I kept texting Debbie. I read it in 2.5 days on 4th of July weekend. I just could not put the book down. It was great. And rom-coms are not my go-to. So really it was just captivating. So if you could just give us a little bit of that story, that'd be great.
Yeah, so this is about Alexis Montgomery. She's a 37-year-old ER physician from a very wealthy, very prominent family. She's driving through this small town late at night on her way home from a funeral, and her car gets run off the road by a raccoon, and this handsome stranger tows her out. He's 28-year-old Daniel Grant. He is the mayor of the small town of Waukon in Minnesota, and they have a one-night stand, and she thinks she's never going to see him again. Guy is from a totally different universe than her. She comes from a family who's got a lot of expectations for her. She just broke up with her ex-boyfriend, Neil, who is the chief of surgery at the hospital that she works at. Her family very much wants her to get back with Neil, even though Neil was very abusive towards her. She can't get Daniel out of her head. She just cannot stop thinking about this guy that she met this one night that she spent with him. And she ends up calling him up, and she ends up going back down to Waukon. And it's very much a forbidden romance. There's a royalty theme. There's a little bit of maybe magic in it. The town of Waukon definitely has some magical elements to it. And it's a really great book. And if, when people ask me, like, if I had to read one book of yours, which one should I read? I always say, just read Part of Your World. I think I'm getting better. I mean, obviously, like I've got more experience under my belt. I'm, really getting my feet under me in terms of like knowing what my readers want. And this book is just, I think it's my best work yet. And it's just a really captivating love story. It's just very romantic, and, and the audiobook. Oh, if you can listen to the audiobook, listen to the audiobook. It's narrated by Julia Whalen, who did Gone Girl. She's an award-winning voice narrator. And then Zachary Weber narrates for Daniel. And Zachary is so good at what he does. He's my favorite narrator. I'm gonna have to quit him at some time because I can't keep having all my heroes the same voice, but I just love him so much. He just does such a great job.
Oh, what? Julia was our guest last month as an author. So we mentioned you and your book, and she was so excited. So we did, many of us did listen to it for her voice also. And she did a great Alexis. So.
Oh, she was perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Absolutely. So your novels are incredibly fun, and this one was hysterical. And you mentioned before the banter back and forth is really what kept me going. I love the banter between the 2 characters. What is it about rom-coms and the genre why do you like to write that? And have you considered writing different genres?
If I ever strayed into another genre, it would be like women's fiction, maybe. But I love romance. Like I've just always loved romance. Even I was in like 9th or 10th grade reading like Bodice Rippers, like the drugstore Bodice Rippers. I've always loved romance, and I love the feeling of falling in love. And if you are reading a really fabulous romance, that's how you feel. You feel like you're falling in love. I don't know if I could ever switch. One thing that that for me, which was really important to me, was I wanted to write the kind of rom-coms that I wanted to read, and that I was kind of having a hard time finding. I wanted to write, books that were funny, but also felt very based in reality. Like this could be somebody or this could be you. I wanted my characters to experience real challenges. All of my books touch on difficult topics. This one, trigger warning for domestic abuse and mental and emotional abuse is what we cover in this book. I do have a lot of sensitivity readers. I have mental health beta readers that read my books to make sure that I'm getting all the aspects right, and then I'm depicting these things respectfully and in a way that is not damaging. I love that we get to the thing that I love about romance. And this is why I don't know if I could ever quit it, is like, no matter what you put these characters through, or no matter what they're going through, there's going to be a happy ever after. They're going to be okay at the end. So it's safe. You can experience all these things and know at the end of this book, these two are going to end up together and it's going to be okay. And it sort of allows you to like dip into more serious things in a manner that is going to make you whole at the end. So I don't know if you can hear Stuntman Mike licking his feet, but if you hear that, he's just down here licking his feet, and it's so loud.
We didn't, but it's very cute to see his face.
Yeah.
You brought up the you brought up the fact that there's abuse in this novel, and this really horrific topic, and there's really two experiences in the book of abuse that we see happening, and even maybe three if you take into account her father, Alexis's father, and the way that he is with her also. But typically when people are looking for rom-coms, they're just expecting lighthearted. And what I loved about it is you really took this topic in such a sensitive way. But it's so brave of you to do that and be able to do that successfully, because I just want to know how that came about. You could have just said, you know what, I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to go there. But what made you want to address this topic in such a, lighthearted book, but still, give it incredible meaning?
And it was extremely real, because I think
Absolutely.
the verbal abuse, physical abuse. So especially verbal abuse, a lot of times people don't even, he's just mean or in a bad mood.
You
But
know how he is.
when you know how he is, and the family didn't even seem to care of all the things that Neil did say to her, but it really did affect her. So again, to go to Nadine's question, like what made you
want to include
that?
I want to include real issues that happen to real women in real life. And that is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So in my second book, The Friend Zone, the main character struggles with infertility. Again, that's another real issue that real women deal with in real life. I actually based that off of my best friend's real life struggle with infertility. These are the things that we deal with. And I think it's healing and helpful for readers to see their own personal stories depicted in books, and maybe even to get a roadmap on how to get out of situations like this. I very much wanted to describe this type of abuse, not just for the people that are experiencing it, but for the people who are witnessing it. I think that this book can very much act as a roadmap on how to get out, or how to help somebody if you see them experiencing this. And, emotional abuse and verbal abuse and mental abuse is so not talked about. We don't talk about it. It's like, if you don't see a bruise, you don't recognize that this person is in fact being abused. Another thing, and this is in the author's notes as well, but my best friend, and she's very vocal about this, she's this incredibly strong, very vocal, very opinionated woman that you would never think could be in an abusive relationship. And I always thought, I think that a lot of us have sort of this, I don't want to call it blasé, but maybe unrealistic view of what abuse looks like and how you would handle it if you were in that situation. I think a lot of us think, oh, well, if a guy ever hit me, I'm out. He hits me one time, I'm done. Okay. It's a lot of times a very slow submersion. And when I met my best friend, I was very much of that mindset. I was like, well, why don't you just leave? Like, if a guy hits you, just go. Right. And I found out that my best friend had been in a horribly, horribly abusive marriage. Her first marriage was so abusive. She still has PTSD from it to this day. He almost killed her. And it was very eye-opening to me to realize that anybody can end up in this situation. Doesn't matter how strong you are, how wealthy you are, how old you are, anybody can end up in an abusive relationship because abusers are very good at what they do. They're incredibly manipulative. They make you feel like you're crazy, like, you're like this thing is happening to you, and they gaslight you, and you even question your own sense of self if it truly is something that is happening to you. If they truly are the bad guy, they make you think that it's your fault. They put the blame on you for your own abuse. And I really wanted to depict that in this book because I was that person once who didn't understand how somebody gets submerged into a relationship like that and can't leave. It's a cycle, and it's a very hard one to break. But again, hopefully I know for a fact that women that have read this or people that have read this have come out of it feeling seen and feeling like they know what to do, and also just recognizing it for what it is. I had one woman who sent me an email, and she was around the same age as Alexis, in a marriage that she'd been in for quite some time, and she was a lawyer. And she said it was not until she read this book that she realized that what her husband was putting her through was abuse. And she went to her therapist and said, this is what's happening. I read this book, and her therapist was like, yeah, it's abuse. Like, just being able to put that name on it is so empowering to help you out of that situation. I'm glad that it's out in the universe, and I'm glad that it's helping people. And I will always write books with real issues in them. I always will. My next book, Brianna's book, she is my first divorced heroine. She's divorced, coming off of a very horrible end of a marriage where he cheated on her, and it left deep scars on her and her ability to connect with the next guy, which I think is also very realistic and something that all of us have dealt with at one point or other in our lives. So I'm really excited for that book. She's my first divorced heroine. She's my first main character of color. Brianna is Salvadorian, which my husband is from El Salvador. So I got a lot of help in that book from my mother-in-law, my sister-in-laws, and all of my whole family on my husband's side. I was able to really tap into the strength of those women and, the things that they have done to become successful, especially in this country.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how did you, when you're starting the process of writing a novel like this, whether it Breeze or Part of Your World, and we'll say Part of Your World because it was kind of the first in this new, 3-book series that you're doing. How did you know Neil was going to be this abusive character? Did you know it was abuse you were going to be talking about? Like with Bree, did you say, okay, I want the character to be, this is the topic I want to address in here in a brave way, as you do? How do you go about that? Like, how does the story come to you? And I don't know, I'm not expressing my question right, but I just love that you're doing this in these wonderful books. How do you shape that in the story?
I always knew that Neil was going to be abusive.
Okay.
I always knew that. And at first, during the first draft of the book, he was actually physically abusive. He never put hands on her, but he was physically intimidating. He would throw things, that kind of thing. And then when, as you get into the book and you get into the plot line, you start to realize, like, that's not who Neil is. Neil would be incredibly manipulative. Neil would be mentally abusive. That's who Neil is. So, books do tend to evolve as you go on. Right. You start off thinking they really do take on a life of their own and, change and morph into, the final book towards the end. I have to write a synopsis for my editor. I have to. She makes me write one. If I don't, I end up having to write a whole book and then change a bunch of stuff after. So I write a synopsis for my editor, so I know generally where I'm going. Okay. But again, the books take on a life of their own as you go, and the characters sort of become their own people. So yes, I knew that Alexis was always going to be dealing with an abusive ex, but the type of abuse did change as I went.
How did you feel about Neil with, towards the end, Neil, makes some changes in his life. Did Neil evolve for you too in that way? Did you expect him to make the changes that he made towards the end?
I was very careful at the end of the book to not I do not want to give people who are survivors of abuse the hope that their exes are going to change, because I don't believe that they normally do. But can they change if you have a ton of self-awareness and you turn around and you look at your life and you go, my life is not good. Why? And you genuinely seek help and therapy and genuinely make a conscious effort to be better. I do think that yes, people can be better versions of themselves. But I really wanted to be careful to not put too much hope in that. I did like though, that at the end, and this is sort of why I did this, I very much wanted Neil to acknowledge that his behavior was generational. Because it is a lot of times it is generational. You see your parents do it and you accept that relationship as normal and you end up chasing that same relationship as you get older. So that's why I wanted Neil to come, to that conclusion that he is the way he is because of what he witnessed growing up. He's got his own insecurities that he never dealt with. I don't want to give away too much. I don't think we're done with Neil. I think we will see more of Neil in maybe, I don't know, book 6.
Okay.
And, we'll get a better idea of, where Neil has gone. I do think that he genuinely did love Alexis. I think that he just did not know how to love her because the man needed therapy. He needed a lot of therapy.
Yeah. So let's put Neil aside for a second and talk about Daniel. So what I loved about Alexis and Daniel, number one, was the age gap. I like that she was older and not Daniel. I like that. She's self-conscious about it at the beginning. There's also a class gap. She's definitely wealthy, comes from a very prominent family, yet they're very compatible. They definitely have strong chemistry. So what's your thoughts on that? Why did you go there with the age gap and the class gap?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Well, for the age gap, for one, I wanted Alexis to be at a certain place in her career that if you're a doctor, if you're a 28-year-old doctor, you're really just getting started. You know what I mean? Sorry, Michael. The dog was barking. If you're a 37-year-old doctor, you're at a very different place in your career. So I really did need her to be a little bit older because I very much wanted her to be established. And also want to normalize reverse age gap relationships. There is nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? And that's why it really is a non-issue in the book. Initially they both have that sort of like cultural, pullback where, they're like, oh, this isn't normal. Daniel doesn't care, but she does because she's a little bit image conscious and a little bit more susceptible to like what are societal norms. But, he very much doesn't care. And it quickly becomes a non-issue as it should be. I also wanted him to be a little bit less established than her in more ways than one. He's still in his 20s. He's still figuring things out. I wanted there to be that really, really heavy gap. But the thing that I love about them as characters is they are so compatible. They are truly, truly meant for each other. They really, really are. They're so similar in all of the ways that really matter. Both of them are caretakers. Both of them, deeply care and tend to the people around them in their lives. That's literally what it has been bred into her since the earliest age, is, for her to care for others. I love that he teaches her things. I love that she changes. I love the growth in her as a character towards the end of the book. I love that Daniel really comes in his own at the end of the book and, becomes this carpenter that, is capable of all of the things that he was always capable of, but he just maybe lacked the know-how to get there. And I love that she helped him with that. But they're just so good together. It's like at the end of a book, if I know that I've done a good job, I can stand back and ask myself, like, for real, are these two going to be together in 50 years? And I know for a fact that they're going to be together in 50 years. There's absolutely no question in my mind that, that Alexis Montgomery Grant is still going to be living in Wakan, in her late 80s, and she's still going to be the town doctor, and Daniel's still going to be right there at her side. Like I know that I've done a good job when I feel like that, and I definitely felt like that with those two.
Yeah. And I love that you have, Daniel teaching her some things. Her life was a little sheltered in her, you know, in her affluence. And he does it in such a gentle way. I mean, obviously he jokes with her sometimes
Right.
too, but it's done in a way that it's not patronizing or some things that we, you know, and especially coming off the fact that she was in an abusive relationship where that Neil would have probably, you know, and did treat her completely differently with what she didn't know.
Mhm.
And this was just such a great, wonderfully warm way of presenting him with knowledge that she didn't have. So I absolutely loved that part of him, the
Mhm.
domestic stuff that he was doing.
Right.
It was just great. It made me laugh out loud. So that's the other thing. There were so many Breeze
Comments, her quips.
comments.
Yeah.
I would follow, yeah, you know, that I would follow a clown into a sewer for a guy with a goat
Goat
in pajamas. I mean, that was, I lost it. I was laughing out loud. And like I said, I was listening to part of it and on a walk, just hysterically
Laughing.
laughing. It was great. So thank you. That was awesome. But I love Daniel's way about him.
I also liked the part when she goes on the girls' trip and she
Oh,
realizes
yes.
here's her life colliding with who she hopes, I mean, her one night stand, and now has become someone she really cares about. So you have Jessica and Gabby, and they're mean girls, really.
Yeah.
So, right?
Yeah. They're mean girls.
They're mean girls. And I love that part of the book because I hated them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did. I hated them. So can you talk about that? Like, do you have experience with mean? I think all women have experience with mean girls. So
You know, okay, funny story, but Jessica is actually very loosely based on an OBGYN that I had once. She was very much like, I like men, I'm married to men, but do not trust them. Like she was just like very like just, you know, and so I modeled Jessica off of her. She would this woman that the real life woman was not a horrible person by any stretch. I just that's where we get the embittered, you know, very like man-hating OBGYN character. And Jessica actually makes an appearance in Brianna's book as well. Brianna says that, you know, she always found Jessica to be a little bit too bitter for her taste, but now that she's bitter too, she actually enjoys Jessica's Burn the Patriarchy movie. So she's like, you know, has lunch with Jessica on occasion. But you know, I just think that those two very much depicted sort of who Alexis was, you know, like we only know Alexis as she is right now. You know, we only know her the way she is with Daniel, and bringing in those two friends very much gives us a sort of a peek into who she was as a person back when she was with Neil, you know, before she's had this other side of, you know, her life, like where she's learning new things and meeting people that are outside of her normal circle. So I think I really liked that whole part of the book where we get to see like, these are the people she was rubbing shoulders with, and this is very normal to her. And she didn't think a thing of it. And they're really awful. You know, that these women are really not that great. Especially Gabby. Gabby's the worst.
yeah.
Did you when you're writing the story and you have all these characters, and because they're in this universe where they intermingle from one book to the other, can you describe to us the process of how you manage that when you're writing? Because as you're talking right now, like I can tell, like you know these people, they live in you, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you then go on the page and keep everything straight? Stories you might have told about a character 2 books before. How do you manage that?
So this is helpful to absolutely no one, but my writing process is truly just to think for months at a time. I just think about my characters for months. I don't write anything down. I just think about them. Like, who they are, you know, what shaped them, you know, what is their personality like, you know, because before I can even sit down, like I always give this as an example, but let's say that I'm writing a scene where the 2 main characters are sitting at a restaurant and they're ordering food. Okay. I have to thoroughly know those people before I can even write that scene. Does he drink? Okay, he doesn't drink. Why? Why doesn't he drink? You know, is he sober? Does alcoholism run in his family? Does he have a health issue? You know, what about her? What is she going to order? You know, maybe she doesn't eat meat, you know, or maybe she doesn't like fried food, you know, or maybe, you know, how do they treat the servers? And how is she observing him interacting with their server? You know, these are just things that like, you have to know these characters. I can't even write a scene where they walk into a restaurant and why are they in that restaurant? Who's paying and why? You know, you know, are they in there because like this is his favorite place and he likes to eat here? Is this level of fanciness of this restaurant normal for them? You know, there's so many things that I have to know about these people before I can even write the most basic scene. So I really sit down and I really, really get to know my characters before I put anything on the page. Because if I even try and write a restaurant scene, I'm gonna have to go back and edit it and fix it all later when I know them. So I really know my characters and I know my side characters too. Like Doug, I think you can feel that Doug is super well fleshed out. Like we'll never, you know, hear more of Doug and why Doug is who Doug is, but we get a very good sense of who Doug is as a person. He feels very real to us. And, you know, he makes sense on the page. And that's because I know Doug. I know all of them. I know Neil. I know Brianna. I know every character in that book so thoroughly before I even sit down to write them. It's not hard for me to carry them into the next book or the next book. Sometimes now, like if you're asking the question, you know, how do I choose who the next book is about? Sometimes it's very obvious who the next book is going to be about. Like, obviously we've got to do Brianna, right? And everybody wanted Doug. I know you guys all want Doug to be Brianna's love interest, but I didn't want to do the big city girl, small town boy thing again. Like I just did that in Part of Your World. And, you know, when I write my male characters, I have to ask myself first, who is she? And what kind of man does she need? And then that's who I write for her. And Brianna is very jaded. She's been very injured, very hurt from her last relationship. She does not like men. She does not trust men. And I needed to write the hero that was going to undo all of that for her. And that wasn't Doug. So Brianna's hero, his name is Jacob. He is a very introverted ER physician who starts working at Royum in the same department as her. And he is every bit the cinnamon roll that she needs. He deals with clinical anxiety. So we get a lot of like mental health rep on the page, which again, I really want to normalize therapy, taking medications for your mental health. And I love that I can do those things in my books. But yeah, like I know every single character. Sometimes like the character for book 6, which is 2 books away from this one, I'm working on my 6th book right now, and it's going to be turned in January of next year. The character in that book, we just get a real quick cameo from him in Brianna's book, Yours Truly. And I really had to like kind of like push him in there. You know what I mean? Because I'm starting a whole new friend group. I'm starting like a whole new group of characters for my final book in my 2-3 book deals. So, you know, I had to kind of create him and like force him into book 5. So we get to meet him for a little bit before he gets his own book.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know, like it's just very easy for me to seamlessly work these characters in together. You know, I love Easter eggs. I love working Easter eggs into the books and, you know, letting the readers find like the title of the book hidden stashed somewhere in the book, or, you know, finding a little Easter egg. Like, I don't know if you caught this, but when Daniel goes to Alexis's house, he notes that there is a photograph of a girl in poppies sitting in a field of poppies on the wall. That is a Sloane Monroe. That's actually a painting. It's not a photograph. And it's the girl in poppies painting that Sloane is painting in the friend zone. It's the painting that Sloane shows to Jason's family in the Happy Ever After playlist. And that painting was bought by Alexis and is hanging on Alexis's wall. So, you know, it's like, I love these Easter eggs that just carry through all of the books.
Wow, that's amazing.
I'm amazed. I'm absolutely floored by your, you know,
process.
And your imagination is just, I can't wait to read Yours Truly. I mean, and what's coming, because this is just,
and I have to look for Easter eggs. I don't
I
usually,
know,
I'm
I
not
feel like I
good
have
at
to go
that.
back and read it again.
Yeah, I'm not.
If you know, if you're on Facebook, I've got a really great Facebook group called the Friend Zone Discussion Group, and each book has its own little group where I do spoiler discussion, and I list all the Easter eggs in the book. So they're all in one place. It's really fabulous. There's a group for the Happy Ever After playlist in which I give the full background on Ernie, Jason's agent, and all of his wives. Ernie's got 5 wives, 5 ex-wives in the book. And I list all of his wives and how he met them and why they broke up. And just like, because I know these characters so well, and I know people are very invested. And sometimes we never see these characters again. So it's fun to be able to talk about their backstory, even though it'll never end up in a book, because I do know their backstories.
Do people come up to you and talk to you about your books on the street? Do they want to talk over dinner about, listen, we got to talk about Daniel.
Right.
I do get approached in public for like all sorts of different reasons. Like recently people have been recognizing my dogs out in public, which is wild.
Social media.
Yes. I had a DoorDash guy walk up, he was delivering food and he stopped, he goes, "Is that TikTok Tess?" He recognized my dog in my driveway. And then there was a shipped delivery guy who recognized Stuntman Mike's looking out the door. People do approach me sometimes about my books, but it happens less than you think it is. You'd think it would. I think most of my readers are pretty introverted, which is why they're book people. I feel like book people tend to just be more introverted. We like, solo activities, like reading books and listening to an audiobook on a walk where no one else is talking to us. So, I don't get approached too much about the books, but I do love talking about these books. Like, it takes years to put a book out. It's usually from start to finish, 2 years from when I start to write it to when it finally hits shelves. And writing a book is like watching a really great TV show that you're super into and nobody has seen it but you. And so like when it finally comes out, it's like, yes, I get to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Does it change a lot from your original, during that 2-year period? Are you having to change a lot of the story, or does it stay pretty much on course for you?
I would say that the meat and potatoes, like the bones of the book, don't change. Like the overarching, like older woman, younger man, big city girl, small town boy, can't be together because of societal expectations and obligations to her family and her hospital, happy ending, like all of that stuff was always there. But, the little details change. Like in the beginning, when I first started writing this, she was a little bit snobby. In the beginning, she was actually a little bit snobby, like in her internals, when we're in the bar with her and she's meeting Daniel. And I was like, what? I don't like that. I think that inherently she's a good person. I think that, I don't think that she's a Gabby or a Jessica. I think that she's been around Gabby's and Jessica's and has that behavior is normalized to her, but I don't think that she is like that. And I don't want her to be unlikable.
Right.
So, like little things like that, like where I tweak their behavior, where I, tweak little scenes to change things. Originally, Daniel had less of an arc. He didn't really like his whole plot point was pretty much like, I'm in love with Alexis and that's it. There was no the house, he's going to lose the house. He needs to become financially independent on his own to be able to afford it. I really didn't want, the reason why I changed that is I really didn't want Alexis to save him. I didn't want him to not lose Grand House because his wife is wealthy and she decided to come to Wakan. I wanted him to save Grand House on his own. That was his growth. That was him, becoming the best version of himself at the end of this book, was him achieving this goal that, was him achieving truly the independence that he needs to be the Grant that Wakan needs. And I didn't want it to be her that did that. So, I added that kind of stuff in, but for the most part, no, the overarching plot of the book does not change.
Any part of the story that you had to take out that we might want to know about?
You know what? I will tell you. In the beginning, when I first started writing this, I actually wrote the entire date. So the entire first date where she goes with him back to his house, Kevin Bacon jumps on her, the dog jumps on her, they're in his garage and they're like having this great conversation. And then, it like the whole scene ends with her sitting on the floor and she's got the baby goat in her lap and he kisses her. And then the next morning, we wake up with him and he's by himself. Right. And then I was like, you know what? I kind of like it better. I feel like it's funnier if it ends with I'm going to have a grilled cheese at your house. And then the next thing you know, wakes up by himself. She's sneaking into her house with her hair a mess. She's got hickeys on her boobs. She's got one shoe on, and you're just like, what happened? Like, it's almost funnier, like not being there and having it recapped. Then it's like your imagination is almost better than like anything I could write. So I ended up cutting that whole first scene and then just ending it that she goes home with him, and then letting us find out with her friend, with Brianna and her brother the same time, letting the reader find out the same time that Derek and Brianna are finding out about the date, letting them find out that way. I thought it was better. So that I did cut, I did change. And, it's not too often that I like, throw away like whole chapters or whole endings, but this book, the ending was tough. There was probably 4 or 5 different endings. And I don't want to ruin it because I don't ever want like people to, I don't ever want people to like rewrite it in their head, but the ending was a little bit more magical, a little bit less like her making a big grand gesture. I mean, she always was going to leave Royaume and end up in Wakan. That was always going to be what was going to happen. But, I had such a hard time like with the balance of that, because I spent the whole book convincing you that it is truly selfish for her to leave Royaume, that she would be, harming so many people by ending this legacy, because the legacy, no one can replace Alexis. Like, that family's name is what makes the Royaume legacy important. So it's what makes the Montgomery legacy work. It's like, you can't just like end a legacy and then pluck in another person's name and it's going to continue on the same way. It's not. It's going to lose so much of its power if it loses that family name. So it's like, I couldn't spend this whole book telling you how important it is, how selfish it is for her to leave, how many, people are going to suffer if she does leave, and then just have her leave. You know what I mean? So I loved this ending where she very much makes it on her terms. She takes William with her. She doesn't end the legacy. In fact, she strengthens it, and she brings her brother, and she brings Lola Simone into it, and makes it like this modern day version of this legacy that's going to continue to have legs and continue to grow and work and do what it's supposed to do for generations to come, because she put her foot down and said, it's going to be this way or it's going to be nothing, because I choose him first. So I loved that ending, but it was very hard to get there. I ended up like, just going back and forth with my editor and like just changing so many different things. One of the original endings had her showing up in the ball gown with her muck boots on, and Daniel is in a ditch and she tows him out of a ditch. And that was the ending, like where like she decides that she's going to leave Royaume. She tells her family to F off and, tows Daniel. And I loved the juxtaposition of that, where we see her be the hero and her doing this very, sort of like rugged hero type thing that Daniel did for her in the very beginning. I still love that ending, but it really needed to go the way it ended up going. And my editor was like, I really just want to see her accept Daniel in front of everybody. Like, I want her to not be ashamed of him. I want everybody to see her say, this is the guy. I'm not embarrassed of him. I choose him. I'm proud of him, and have her do that in front of everyone. And so that's why I created the gala. At the end of the book, there was always going to be a gala, but she was never going to go to it. She was just going to run out of her house in her dress and never go to the gala. So this time I actually placed them at the gala and have her, choose him in front of everybody. And the grand gesture, this is, the first time in any of my books where the grand gesture is her and not him. She's the one that makes a grand gesture and pleads for forgiveness, because she needed to after everything she put poor Daniel through.
Yeah, and it's so empowering for her after being with Neil too, being able to stand up, and it was great. I had chills at that at that point. You knew something big was happening at that gala, and boy, did it totally satisfied. So
yes.
Do you want to see if we have any questions from our group? Does anyone have any questions for Abby? Hey guys. Hey, questions, comments, favorite characters? Oceanside's usually not so quiet.
Like deer in headlights. I know, you put everybody on
I
the spot.
know. Yes.
Well, how about I tell you guys a little bit about yours truly?
Yes.
And if anybody thinks of a question while I'm telling you about yours truly, you can ask it. So yours truly is Brianna's book. It's out in April of next year, and we're going to get advanced reader copies very, very soon. I just turned in the final draft, And I think it's going to be up on NetGalley probably they're telling me by end of August. I've already seen the cover. I can't even tell you what color it is, but it is the cutest freaking cover ever. So yours truly is about Brianna. We pick up pretty much right at the epilogue of Part of Your World. So it's like the same time we're in April, just like we are in the epilogue here. And Brianna's really just like sort of living the worst time of her life. She's on the cusp of her divorce being finalized. Her divorce is finalized in 2 weeks. Alexis has moved 2 hours away, so she doesn't even have her best friend close by. And Brianna is running for the chief position that Alexis gives up at the end of this book, because why not, right? Like, what else is she doing? And it's alluded to in Part of Your World that Brianna's brother Benny is pretty sick, and that his kidneys, his autoimmune disease is starting to affect his kidneys. When we get into Brianna's book, yours truly, Benny is now in full renal failure and on dialysis. And unfortunately, Benny has a very rare blood type, which is going to make finding a kidney donor virtually impossible. The average wait list for a kidney is 4 to 7 years as it is. And that's with a living or a deceased donor. A deceased donor, the kidney doesn't last as long and there's a higher chance of rejection. So ideally you would get a living donor, but he's got this rare blood type. Her brother's only 27 years old. He's incredible. When we started with Brianna's book, Benny is incredibly depressed. He's literally clinically depressed. And it very much is affecting Brianna and how she's, doing. Her divorce is coming up. She's running for chief, and this new guy has just started, and all the nurses hate him. They're calling him Dr. Death because on his first day, every single patient that he saw died, which is, it happens. They work in an ER, but it's not, normal. Like, it's not on your first day. That's a little bit odd. And she finds out that Dr. Gibson, the current chief of emergency medicine, who came back after Alexis left, is holding off on the vote for Dr. Jacob Maddox, who was the chief of emergency medicine at the hospital that he just transferred from. And Brianna is like instantly like, oh, this is boys club stuff. I am so sick of this patriarchy business. Like, why are you holding off the vote for him so he's got a better shot? I've been here 10 years. So she comes right out of the gate really disliking Jacob and really just gets off onto a bad first start with him. It's sort of like an enemies to lovers, friends to lovers. So as the book goes on, and this is all back jacket stuff, I'm not spoiling anything, Jacob ends up writing her a letter. He's very introverted. He's got a lot of anxiety, a lot of social anxiety, and he's done a lot of really stupid things during his first few days at Royum Northwestern. And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to write her a letter because obviously I'm saying all the wrong things whenever I'm in front of her. So he writes her a letter, and she writes him back, and he writes her back, and they start this really fabulous, some of my best work, bantery back and forth letters between the two of them. And, he starts to like really come out of his shell. And in the meantime, Benny's nephrologist, which is a kidney doctor, is actually Jacob's old roommate. They're best friends. And, the nephrologist is telling Jacob, oh God, this poor kid, he's never going to get a kidney donor. And Jacob's mother had lupus and ended up having a kidney transplant when Jacob was a teenager. And he's always wanted to pay it forward. He's always wanted to like repay that such, generous gift. And he decides that he's going to run the labs for Brianna's brother, but he's not going to tell anyone. He's not going to tell Brianna that he's doing this because he's so introverted that if Brianna were to know, he doesn't like the display of like, the gratitude would embarrass him. He's just so introverted. He doesn't want anybody to know. He doesn't want anybody to make a big deal about it. He just wants to do it quietly. And he ends up being a match. Jacob is a universal donor. So he decides to donate his kidney to Brianna's brother. He's going to do it in secret. Brianna immediately finds out about it, like within 12 hours finds out about it. And she's just so indebted to him, so completely grateful to Jacob. And she's like, is there anything that you need? Like, I repay this debt to you any way I can. And Jacob's like, well, actually, my ex-girlfriend of 2.5 years, the reason why I changed hospitals, she is marrying my little brother. And my whole family is like against this wedding. They're so upset on my behalf. And it's like, I just want them to think that I'm okay. Like, me being upset about it is not going to change it. They're going to get married, whether my family supports them or not. They're going to have kids, and the kids are going to be blameless. Like, I just want everybody to let this go and just be happy for them and just stop looking at me like I'm going to implode. So I need a date. I need them to think I have a girlfriend. And Brianna's like, done. So Brianna and Jacob fake date for the bulk of this book. So it's a really fabulous, like, enemies to lovers, fake dating trope. He is just so, it's like, oh, you just want to protect Jacob at all costs. He's like my absolute favorite hero of any of my books. And I know everybody's a huge fan of Daniel, so that is saying a lot. It's just a really, really wonderful book. And if you guys love Brianna in Part of Your World, you are going to just adore her in her book, because it's just nothing but Brianna, you know what I mean? She's very sassy. She just, says whatever she wants. There's a really great group of characters in this book. Like I say, I know my characters inside and out, and Jacob's family is chef's kiss. They are just a riot. There's so much wonderful diversity in this book. It's just a really, really good book, and I'm very proud of it. So I cannot wait until August when everybody gets to read it. Hopefully you guys get some advanced copies.
I hope so too. Yes. And I love your enthusiasm, and your love for your characters comes across. It's why your books are so good. Just listening to you talk, why it's just such a pleasure to read these books, because you feel them. We know these characters too, and not many, there's not a lot of authors that can do that so well. So, it really is, what a gift, really amazing books that you have, and you've created this little world that we just love to be in and share, along with you and your other readers and fans. What have you been, we always like to ask our authors of other authors that they like, and some books or authors you might want that we wouldn't know
about
read.
Like, who do you recommend for us, or what's on your shelf right now? Who are some of your favorites?
Well, I was buddy reading the A Court of Thorn and Roses series. So I'm on to Nesta's book. Really, really enjoyed that, particularly on audiobook. For spicy books, Trelina Pucci.
Yes.
She's an indie author, and I love the spice in her book. It is very spicy. Let's see. I recently read a book called Forever Boy, and it's by Kate, I think it's Kate Swenson, and really, really enjoyed that book. So she is a local, she's a huge blogger in the autism community. Her blog is Finding Cooper's Voice. Her son is severely autistic. They told her that her son was the most autistic child they've ever seen when he was diagnosed. Yeah, so it's her story from, start to where she is now, getting his diagnosis and all the years of like struggling in the school system and trying to get him the best care that you could possibly get. And I was very captivated by that story. She narrates the audiobook herself, and that was just really, I love hearing when it's like more of a biography. I love hearing the book told in the author's voice. So that was a great read, very eye-opening too. I love books that make me feel like I've learned, or that help me be a more empathetic person. And that's definitely one of those books. So I highly recommend that. Let's see, what else? Trying to think what else I've been. I mean, of course, Emily Henry, People We Meet on Vacation was one of my favorite books of last year. So if you've never read any Emily Henry, pick that one up, because that was just fabulous. I think that's about all that I'm reading right now. Listening to Nesta's book, The Court of Thorn and Roses series is where I'm at.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So are there any questions? No, a quiet group. Are there any questions online? Anyone in our Zoom chat?
They are all like in their after lunch.
I know.
Like you never want to be the person that does like a presentation right after lunch, because everybody's just so tired.
No, well, we love having you here. We have your books, front and center. We've been recommending Part of Your World, this summer as like just such a fun, great, and important read. I don't know what else to say. It's just so great.
Do you think we can end with a little lightning round though?
Yeah, let's do it.
We give you 60 seconds and we just ask you some fun
some fun questions. On the clock. I'll read the questions, you clock it. Yes, hang on, I'm gonna clock it. All right, and go. Which character from a novel would you like to have a drink or coffee with?
Oh, man. I would probably say Alex from People We Meet on Vacation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's just got like such subtle like hilarity about him. I would love to meet him in person.
Okay. What was your favorite pandemic cocktail or snack?
You know, I actually stopped drinking during the pandemic just because, like, I don't know why. It's like I'm getting older, and every time I have like a glass of wine with dinner, I wake up the next morning, I'm like puffy and I feel gross. And I'm like, and you go to restaurants and they have the best mocktails now. Like everybody has these like really fabulous mocktails. And I started to realize the only reason why I would even want to get a drink at a restaurant is to try something super fun and creative. And it's like, I can do that without feeling icky the next day. So I've just started drinking mocktails. And I am like loving it because I have a lot of vices already, like caffeine and sugar. And so if I can kick alcohol, which was never really like a big thing for me to begin with, like why not, right? So yeah, so let's see, what was my favorite pandemic mocktail? Well, I could tell you when I'm at a place that maybe doesn't have a lot of like really great mocktail options, I'll just go with like a cranberry with club soda and a twist of lime. It's super refreshing and I love it, and it's like so easy to even just make it home.
Yeah, true. What shows have you been binging?
I love Schitt's Creek, but I am watching The Boys right now, and I'm obsessed. I love that show. Like just I just love it. It's so well done.
Yeah, I love that show too. Theater or the couch?
Theater, the couch.
Couch.
Okay. Yeah, 1000%. Yeah, the couch.
What book were you forced to read as a child, but you ended up enjoying?
You know, I can't really recall a book that I was forced to. I actually forced myself to read a lot of the classics that were not even like required reading, but I was like, I should read these because they're the classics. You know, Great Expectations, The Great Gatsby. Those were all, I read them all on my own and I liked them.
Okay.
And actually, you know what? I liked them probably not even expecting that I would like them, but just reading them out of like a sense of literary obligation. But I did like them.
Okay, cool. The last one we kind of already touched on, but can you recommend a favorite author? And you kind of did already, but
That was fun. We went over a minute, but I liked your answers. I was having fun.
yeah. Gonna try some mocktails and watch The Boys tonight.
Yeah.
Sounds like my kind of night on the sofa.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, this afternoon. We had a lot of fun, everyone. Everyone had a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it. We're going to definitely look forward to yours truly.
Brianna,
Yeah.
can't wait.
And how do you want to end?
Yeah, and thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your time and this, you know, your wonderful novels with us. We're really just the best. We're going to look for you on Facebook so we can get some more of those little Easter eggs in there. I feel like I need to go back and read part of your world again. And I didn't even touch on the whole little Disney kind of aspect in there too, but I loved the whole Cinderella with the shoe. Oh, so good, Abby. So good. Loved it. Loved it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yep. Share this link with me so I can share it in my groups and everybody can watch it when they're not outside enjoying the sunshine.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Abby.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Have a good
guys.
Take care. Bye.